Attention, you're listening to The Todd Huff Show, America's home for conservative, not bitter talk and education. Be advised, the content of this program has been documented to prevent and even cure liberalism, and listening may cause you to lean to the right. And now, coming to you from the Full Suite Wealth Studios, here's your conservative but not bitter host, Todd Huff.
Welcome to all you conservative but not bitter listeners out there. This is the Todd Huff Show. I'm Gary Varvel, filling in for Todd. I'm a syndicated cartoonist with Creators Syndicate, and I thought I'd start the show off with a cartoon review. And I realize that you can't see the cartoons, but let me describe them for you. I recently, last month, drew a cartoon of Iran as the Black Knight from Monty Python's 1975 comedy film, Monty Python and the Holy Grail. If you saw that show, you saw that movie, there's this Black Knight, and he's trying to block the way for the king, and they get into a fight, and the king cuts his arms and his legs off. And even though he's nothing but a stump, he just says, "'Tis but a flesh wound." And so I drew this cartoon of Iran as the Black Knight, and he's surrounded by all of this buildings that are bombed out and debris, and yet they won't give up. And why won't they give up? Because they have this unholy mission to destroy the great Satan and the little Satan. And that's why they want nuclear weapons, because they want to use them. Unlike a lot of other nuclear powers who have nuclear weapons as a deterrent so that you won't fire on them, they won't fire on you, and there's peace by mutually assured destruction. Iran's a different creature in that they have a theological bent to please their God by destroying who they call the infidels. And that's America and Israel. And they want to drive Israel into the sea. And I'm going to talk more about that in a later. But so that was one of my cartoons. I drew a couple of founding fathers in a room, and looks like they're working on the Constitution. So a Thomas Jefferson kind of character says, "Should we ban communism and Sharia law?" And Ben Franklin says, "Surely our descendants won't be dumb enough to vote for that." And yet here we are. I think they overestimated us, because now we have communists and Muslim, what they call the Red-Green Alliance. Red being communist and green being the followers of Islam. And here they are running in these primaries under the Democratic big tent, and they're winning. How do you explain that? It's insanity. So I move on. I drew a cartoon of the Democratic donkey, and he's being squeezed by this snake. If you can imagine the symbol for medicine, being this pole with a snake wrapped around it. The snake I labeled the Democratic Socialists of America, and it's giving the squeeze to the Democrats. They're discovering the hard way that when you feed the snake, eventually the snake feeds on you. So we'll see where that goes. I'm going to do, I did another cartoon of Mamdani. Mamdani was threatening Benjamin Netanyahu that when he comes to the UN in New York, that he was going to have him arrested on war crimes. So I drew a cartoon of Mamdani's putting up this wanted poster for Netanyahu, and at the same time he's looking at his reflection in the window of this building, and looking back at him is a character who looks like Hitler. What he wants to do is he wants to punish the Jewish nation specifically, and he's said some pretty harsh things. And again, I'm going to get into more of that in just a moment. Drew a cartoon of John Fetterman. John Fetterman's driving this really short school bus, and if you know what a short school bus is, if you understand the connection, so the bus is labeled Democratic Party, and in the back of the bus are all these clowns, and so and they're holding signs that say "Death to," or they have balloons that say "Death to Israel" and "From the river to the sea" and "Socialism now." And I have got Fetterman driving this bus, and he says, "Start acting normal back there, or I'm getting off this bus." Because Fetterman has decided that, if they make that their party platform about just, getting rid of Israel or not supporting Israel, that he was going to be out. We had the story about Dr. Fauci's diary, and of course he went before the Senate, and then he pled the fifth 111 times. Incredible. So I've got Dr. Fauci writing in his diary, "Dear diary, on advice of my counsel, I got a lock for my diary." Yeah, so he writes his diary on government computer, I guess. And so once we got access, that's public property. If you're going to do a diary, here's a note for you. Just keep it to yourself, and maybe don't put it on a computer that can be read. I drew a cartoon of the DSA, Democratic Socialist of America. It's the DSA Titanic, and it's sinking, and while the Democrat is saying, "All aboard." Yeah, so I'm thinking that these Democratic Socialists who are winning these primary elections, I think if American public just has common sense that they're not going to vote for them in the general election. I just think it's insanity. This is America was not founded on socialism. Sure, we have some socialistic programs, the welfare state, but once we go down this road, there's no turning back, and I think that that's going to be a huge mistake. And how did we even get here? Why is socialism so popular with young people? I think that Todd has talked about that already, and I'm not going to rehash that right now. I'm moving on to another cartoon. The WNBA is having problems determining what a woman is. This all started when Sophie Cunningham made the comment that girls' sports was for girls, and then I drew a cartoon early on in this debate. Drew this on August 3rd. I've got this fever locker room, and I've got this big guy dressed in rainbow colors holding a pink gym bag, and he says, "Can I play in the WNBA?" And I used Fever coach Stephanie White's own words. She said, "I'm not educated enough to say, but exclusion is not the answer." So she is saying that she doesn't want to exclude anybody from the WNBA, even a biological man. Look, folks, the Bible's very clear about this. There's only two genders. God made them in the beginning, male and female. There you go. That's it. And you can't switch back and forth. We have a story just recently about a mom and a daughter who went to a fever game that was being played in Atlanta, and they were asked to leave because one of the fans complained about their shirts, which one of them had a shirt that just had XX on it, and the other one had an XX, and then below that, XY shirt. So now chromosomes are hate speech. Are we living in some crazy, insane times or not? Anyway, in my drawing, I did this big guy. I got Stephanie White standing there saying, exclusion's not the answer. Right behind her, I drew Sophie Cunningham pointing a finger at the guy, which, she became famous for her pointing. And then next to her is Caitlin Clark. And then I've got some other people in the background. Look, this has gone off the rails. So the WNBA starts doing, they were going to have a meeting to discuss what a woman is, And so I drew a cartoon of the WNBA commissioner, and she's gone back to school. So I have her in a school desk, and she's opened a book that says Biology 101. So we're going to go back to the beginning and try to study. They still, as I understand at the time I'm recording this, still haven't decided what a woman is. And of course, then you had Enos Cantor Freedom and Royce White, former NBA players, who now said that they want to declare for the draft for the WNBA. This just gets funnier and funnier. It's like a Saturday Night Live skit back when Saturday Night Live was funny. I drew. Let's see. I drew Iran. Again, another Iranian cartoon of this mullah, and he's down in the bottom of the cartoon in the middle, and he is rubbing a lamp, like a magic lamp, and the lamp is labeled Radical Islam. And out of the lamp, instead of this genie, is this angel of death. Like I said before, I mean, it's basically a death cult, and they have one agenda in order to please their Allah. They're trying to destroy Israel and America as well. We're harder to get to because we're separated by a great ocean, but nevertheless, the concern for a lot of Americans today is that the ocean is not a factor now because they're here, and they're trying to multiply, and they're running for office, and the concern for a lot of us who are awake is that they want to take us down from the inside, from within. So those are just some of the cartoons that I did. I'm not done yet. I got a few more. Here we go. So I drew a cartoon just recently of Mayor Mamdani and his whole deal with rent controls in New York. And so I've got him standing outside of this big apartment building, and a guy standing next to him who's labeled a landlord, and the landlord says, "Welcome to my property, Mr. Mayor." And then I have Mamdani saying, "This is our property." And that's the way I think landlords are being treated in New York. There are so many regulations on what they can do with their property. They can't raise rent right now. And even though their expenses continue to go up, they can't raise the rent. And then they have all of these different rules about what people can do with their property. And as a result, some of them have filed bankruptcy because they couldn't afford it anymore. But the bottom line is Mamdani sees these properties as public property, and that rental property is basically a utility that can be used. So that is what's going on there. And then I did a cartoon about Massachusetts. They just passed a law. Their Governor Healy signed into law abortion right up to birth. And it was the creepiest scene. I'm sure you've seen the video if you're paying attention of when she signs this bill. All these women behind her start clapping. And I thought that was the most bizarre thing. So I did basically a recreation of that scene. I've got her holding the bill up like, Donald Trump does. He signs a bill and he holds it up so you can see it. And I've got it labeled abortion up to birth. Massachusetts governor at her desk. And then behind her, instead of these women, I drew all of these Grim Reapers. And they all have bloody hands and they're all clapping for her. I just saw that as just... And a lot of people have commented that this is the same spirit of Moloch from the Old Testament, child sacrifice, where these people would sacrifice their babies to this god Moloch. And I think the spirit of Moloch is alive and well, and has been since Roe v. Wade was enacted or approved by the Supreme Court all those years ago. And we're looking at 63, 64 million babies that have died since then. And we thought that when the Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade in the Dowd case, we thought that abortions would go down. Certainly they have gone down in Indiana. Indiana was the first state in the union to ban abortion, and there are very few now. Some medical cases in some cases, but most of the women who want to have an abortion will go to a different state. But nationwide, abortions have gone up. This is the spirit of Moloch, the spirit of death. And this is what's so concerning about the trajectory that that America has been on for quite some time. Another cartoon drew AOC, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. She recently said something. She was repeating a quote from some local politician in New York who said that woke one was crazy. So she says this in an interview, and she's trying to distance herself from the woke one agenda, which was, a lot of defund the police. Remember that? During the 2020 riots and all of those kinds of things, and the George Floyd riots, I guess. A lot of people started talking about, a lot of Democrats started talking about defunding the police. And then, she made comments about she wanted to transfer that money for the police to counselors and psychiatrists or psychologists. But anyway, now she's trying to distance herself a little bit from that. Guys like Fox News' Jesse Waters, he surmised that she's preparing for a run for president, so she's trying to move back to the middle. Anyway, how do you forget this stuff? How do you forget? People were looting stores and all of that, and she's talking about defunding the police. So I drew her. That's a long setup to get to my cartoon. My cartoon is I drew her as one of the men in black. So she's dressed in black, got the shades on, and she's got a neuralizer. If you've watched those movies, the Men in Black movies, they have this neuralizer which makes people who've seen aliens, makes them forget. It causes, and then you can replace their memory with a new memory. And so AOC's neuralizer, she's pointing it right at the viewer, and she says, woke one was crazy, which is what she said, and then she says, I would never defund the police. So she's trying to distance herself there. A lot of people have proposed that woke 2 is more crazy than woke 1. Now, woke 1, I just talked about what that was about, some of it. Woke 2 is this whole socialist agenda of the Democratic Socialists of America, and they want to abolish the Senate. They want to abolish the presidency. This is insane. They hate the U.S. Constitution, which has lasted over 250 years. I've read that the average length of time that a constitution lasts for a country is usually around 17 years. A lot of countries like France have had so many different constitutions. Every time they have a change in power, they rewrite a new constitution. In America, our constitution has lasted 250 years. How do you explain that? I think the explanation is because our founders founded this nation on Christian and biblical principles. And they looked closely at the book, specifically the book of Deuteronomy, and they made laws setting up our government, which has been blessed by God, and that's why it's lasted. And that's also a good indication why the Democrats and the far left are trying to destroy it, because that's what they do. That's what progressives do. They destroy what is already there. And they a lot of times it gets replaced with something so much worse. I can't think of one thing that they have built that has been good. I can't. Maybe you can name something. But, I think Dennis Prager said years ago, the left destroys everything they touch. And he used the example of like the Boy Scouts. They wanted to go in there. They wanted to remove the word boys. They wanted to make it, open to all children. And, there's a reason there's a Boy Scouts and a Girl Scouts. But the left doesn't create anything. They just go and destroy everything that's already there. I'm a conservative, and I want to conserve what is good. So those are just some of the cartoons I've done recently, and I always tell people that I don't work for a living, because this is not work for me. It's fun to sit down and draw and make fun of things. So that's what we're going to do today. When we come back from the break, I'm going to get into some little heavier stuff and not so much the cartoons. I'm going to talk about some stuff I've been writing about on my Substack, and you can follow me on garyvarvel.substack.com. That is Gary, Gary, and Varvel is V as in Victor, AR, V as in Victor, EL.substack.com. You can follow my newsletter there. And I write about current events, like the cartoon I drew of the donkey being squeezed by the Democratic Socialists of America snake. This is what I wrote about that at that time. Look no further than the Ethiopian politician Milat Kiros, who recently won her primary for Colorado's 1st congressional district. She bluntly proclaimed, get this is a quote, "There is a shift in the global world order that exists today, and a fundamental shift that we have to have going forward. That means getting more immigrants into office." Did you get that? Getting more immigrants into office. That's their goal. That's what they think is going to, that's the global world order shift. So they want, and she's admitting that they want a global world order. So much for nationalism, so much for national sovereignty. Is that really what America needs? Now, let me give you a Bible verse. Deuteronomy 17:15 says this: "It's a clear warning to Israel. Do not place a foreigner over you." Let me repeat that. Do not place a foreigner over you. Deuteronomy 17:15. And furthermore, Deuteronomy 28, it lists several severe consequences upon Israel for turning away from God. And it includes that God was going to bring them drought, disease, pestilence. And then in verse 43, this is Deuteronomy 28, verse 43 and 44, it says this: "The foreigners who reside among you will rise above you higher and higher, but you will sink lower and lower. They will be the head and you will be the tail." So part of the curse for Israel was that they would have foreigners as their leaders. When we come back, we're going to look more at this in just a minute. And we're back. This is Gary Varvel filling in for Todd Huff today. Ethiopian-born politician Milat Kiros. She won the Colorado's 1st congressional district primary, and then she said that this is a shift in the global order that exists today, and then she says that means getting more immigrants into office. Is that what America needs? Does America need more immigrants, more foreigners in our government serving the American people? Is that what America needs? In the first segment, I talked about Deuteronomy 17:15 that issues a warning and do not place a foreigner over you. I also talked about, just briefly, about Deuteronomy chapter 28. If you go read that chapter, it's talking about the curses that God would bring upon Israel if they forgot God. If they turned against God, served other gods, then he would bring all of these things like drought, disease, pestilence onto Israel to punish them in order to wake them up as a nation, to get them to come back to God. And then he says in verses 43 and 44, this is a quote: "The foreigners who reside among you will rise higher above you, but you will sink lower and lower, and they will be the head and you will be the tail." Now, that's part of the punishment to Israel, is that foreigners who reside among them would actually become their leaders. Is that the curse? Is that the punishment that America is faced with today? And are Americans going to wake up and stop this from happening? and vote a different direction. We determine our own future. So what I'm asking, and I wrote about this in my Substack, is America experiencing a similar kind of judgment? You know, the U.S. Constitution explicitly requires that a president be natural born. And I think the founders got that idea from Deuteronomy 17:15. We don't want, we want to safeguard our nation from leaders with divided loyalties. Someone who's born in another country who has actually a loyalty to that country comes here, and if they were to become president, that could be a problem. Why shouldn't the same kind of restriction, I say, why shouldn't the same kind of restriction apply to every high office in government? Well, I think we should look at that. I think that the more and more that we have foreigners who become leaders, I think this is cultural suicide. For one thing, America, from the 1600s till about 1960, was predominantly Christian. I'm talking about 90% Christian. And then from 1960 on, we have had this downward slope, and it's picked up speed ever since. Oh, we have churches that seem to be doing well. We have what we call mega churches. You see them pop up, and you think, okay, Christianity's coming back. And the Christian church still funds the majority of missionaries around the world. There's still some good things, but at the same time, and I wrote about this in my Substack about the wheat and the tares, which is a parable that Jesus spoke about. And that is that while everyone was sleeping, Jesus said, he said he was the actual sower who went into his field, sowed good wheat, which are the children of the kingdom. And then while everyone slept, the enemy came in and sowed tares. I think while America has been asleep, the enemy has come in and sown among us people who hate our country. I know that sounds harsh, but how do you explain some of the things that are happening in America? Some of the people who are rising to power because America is asleep. I wrote about in my Substack after October 7th, 2023, after the terrible attack by Hamas and the Palestinians upon innocent Israelis, 1,200 dead. I wrote in my Substack the next day that this would be the beginning of the rise of anti-Semitism worldwide. How did I know that? Well, for one thing, I know history. Anytime that Israel defends itself, the whole world turns against it. So that's one. I also know the Bible, and the Bible speaks that in the last days, all nations will be gathered against Israel, and specifically against Jerusalem in Zechariah chapter 12. I knew that when Israel would retaliate, and they would have to. It's understandable. If our neighbor here in America attacked us, killed 1,200 people, we would immediately attack them. And so when Israel responded the way they did, then the world turned against them. And I did a cartoon of, a couple eating dinner with their son who had come home from college. And the father says, son, your mom and me are concerned about what you're learning in college, or how college has impacted you and has changed you. I got the caption a little wrong, but the point was the son looked like Adolf Hitler. He had the little Hitler mustache, the hair pulled over to one side, and a pro-Hamas button. This is, how do you explain it? I mention a lot of times when I go out and speak that, Russia invaded Ukraine. I didn't see demonstrations against Russia all over the country. I didn't see them in college campuses. Nobody was demonstrating against Russia. I don't think anybody liked it, but nobody cared that much. But Israel, little tiny Israel, the size of New Jersey, trying to defend themselves and trying to knock down the people who are attacking them, all of a sudden they're in the wrong, and they shouldn't even be there. And this whole thought of river to the sea, that's what it means. It means annihilate the Jews and remove them all from the land of Israel. So what does the Bible have to say about this? Now, if you quote, one of the things the left has learned, if you quote Genesis 12:3, the Abrahamic covenant, in which God says to Abraham, I will bless those who bless you, and whoever curses you, I will curse, and all the peoples of the earth will be blessed through you. If you say that to somebody, they will immediately say, that promise was made only to Abraham, not his descendants. But as I wrote in my Substack, you can look further into the Old Testament, and you can find this promise being handed down. So when Isaac speaks to God, speaks God's blessing over Jacob, for instance, in Genesis chapter 27, verse 29, he uses the exact same formula. He says, many peoples serve you, and nations will bow down to you. May those who curse you be cursed, and may those who bless you be blessed. So Abraham, his son is Isaac. Isaac now is blessing his son Jacob, and the blessing he gives is that may those who curse you be cursed, and those who bless you be blessed. All right, so now we've gone from Isaac to Jacob, and then Jacob, in Genesis chapter 28, verse 14, he says this, your offspring shall be like the dust of the earth, and in you and your offspring shall all families of the earth be blessed. So this is the Abrahamic covenant being handed down once again, one more time, Numbers chapter 24. In Numbers chapter 24, verse 9, Balaam, the prophet Balaam, is speaking, and he says, may those who bless you be blessed, and those who curse you be cursed. And he's talking about Israel. So he's talking about the nation of Israel. Now, the other thing that the critics will say today, well, the people who are in Israel now aren't really the Jews. Oh, come on. This is silly. They'll say to me, and they'll say, Gary, don't you understand that God has rejected the Jews after they crucified Christ? Well, first of all, you got to think about what the Bible has to say about the crucifixion of Jesus Christ. So the Jewish leaders handed him up to be crucified, but they didn't actually crucify him. It was the Romans who crucified him. And specifically, if you want to look at who is guilty for the crucifixion of Christ, you and me. Jesus Christ became sin for us he who knew no sin became sin for us so that we might have the righteousness of Christ. He died in our place. So we all are guilty. And then the other thing is the Bible talks about that this was in the mind of God from the beginning. So this was God's plan all along. But then you also have to look at Romans chapter 11, verse 1. And a lot of people don't understand this because they don't know. They haven't read it. But the Apostle Paul, who was a Jew, he said this, I ask then, has God rejected his own people, the nation of Israel? Of course not. I myself, an Israelite, a descendant of Abraham, and a member of the tribe of Benjamin. Now that's pretty specific. So the point is, God's plans have not failed, and he hasn't rejected Israel. He still has a plan for the nation. He has a plan for the Jews, and that is that they would eventually come to Christ. In Numbers chapter 23, verse 19, this reminds us, God is not a human that he should lie, not a human being that he should change his mind. Does he speak and then not act? Does he promise and not fulfill? Do you hear what he's saying? He's saying that God keeps his promises, and he's going to keep his promise to Israel. I'll talk more about that when we come back. You're listening to the Todd Huff Show. I'm Gary Varvel, filling in for Todd Huff today, and you can follow my work at garyvarvel.substack.com. I draw cartoons for a living. I also write. I write about a lot of stuff that interests me, the culture. Also, from a biblical worldview, I have studied the Bible, taught an adult Sunday school class for about 3 decades, and love the Word of God. And following up on what I was just talking about God doesn't change his mind, Numbers 23:19. And I was making the case that we should continue to bless Israel because of the Abrahamic covenant. I think if America one day has a president who turns against Israel, then that will be the end of America. I think that that would be the last straw. Now, standing with Israel, does that mean that we blindly approve every policy or political action that the nation takes? No. Just as I love America, I'm an American. I'm a patriot. But do I agree with every decision that Congress makes or the Supreme Court makes or the president makes? No, I don't. I still love this country and I still support it and I will still bless it and pray for it. And that's the way we should do with Israel. But I don't think we should never curse Israel. We should never turn our back on it because I believe that God's overarching plan and covenant for that nation has not changed. And so for our own well-being, I think that we should continue to support them. This has always been an issue that's been dear to my heart because just like John Fetterman, I don't know his reasons for his support for Israel, but he's said that if his party just flat out turns against Israel, then he'll leave the party. Well, those are pretty strong words. Which makes me wonder, are we witnessing the devolving of a political party into moral madness? The Democrats' embrace of socialism is just the latest in a long line of failed anti-biblical philosophies. When a political movement rejects God and His truth, it inevitably begins to champion what's evil. And today, the modern left openly promotes abortion, same-sex marriage, and transgenderism, all of which stand in direct opposition of God's created order. Too many common-sense Americans and faithful Christians have remained silent in the face of this decline. And Ephesians 5:11 tells us, "Take no part in the unfruitful works of darkness, but instead expose them." Which, I came across this not too long ago, and I think this bears repeating so that this audience could hear it. Somebody wrote some time ago that first we overlook evil, and then we tolerate evil, and then we legalize evil, and then we even celebrate evil, and finally we persecute those who still call it evil. That's where we are. That is exactly where we are. The Bible foresaw this. In Isaiah 59:15, it says, "Whoever shuns evil becomes the prey." I have become the prey many times. You speak out against the evil that is in the culture. Nevertheless, never mind the fact that we overlooked it, we tolerated it, we legalized it, and then we celebrate it. We parade it down the streets. And anybody like me who says, this is evil, it's still evil. I don't care if you celebrate it or not. I don't care if you legalize it. It's still evil in the eyes of God. And that's what the Bible says. Well, then you're going to make yourself the prey. You'll be the one that they come after. I remind you, and it's been mentioned many times here recently in these days, Isaiah 5:20 says, "Woe to those who call evil good and good evil, who put darkness for light and light for darkness, who put bitter for sweet and sweet for bitter." And when the Bible says woe, that means whoa. It means uh-oh. It means you're in trouble. It's not going to go well for you. So what do we do? Christians, I'm speaking specifically to you. We need to pray for God's mercy. We need to ask Him for the courage to warn those we love of the coming judgment, because we are all going to stand in judgment someday. In the end, every one of us is going to stand before God, and we're going to have to give an account for how we lived. Many people are going to have to give an account for their silence. Yes, I mean, that is the sin of omission. There's the sin of commission, when actually you do something that's evil. You do something that's sinful against God. But the sin of omission is not responding to it. And just like in a wedding ceremony, they'll say, if anyone they want anyone to speak up who has a problem with this marriage, and if not, remain silent. And your silence is approval for that marriage. Well, by the same token, it's this: if you're silent in the midst of evil, then you're putting your seal of approval on it. You're not voicing any opposition. Yeah, in a marriage ceremony, when they say, "Has anybody got any reason why these two people should not be married?" And if not, then remain silent. After that, then don't say anything. But sometimes the loving thing to do is to speak up, and that's what I do at garyvarvel.substack.com. I write. I also draw cartoons. And speaking to the culture, that's what Todd Huff does here at the Todd Huff Radio Show. I'm Gary Varvel. I really appreciate filling in for Todd today. I hope you'll check out my work as well. Until we meet again, God bless America.